Did we go too big? After 5 years of living in an RV, we wanted to upsize and get some more space compared to the 26-foot travel trailer that we were currently in.
So we ended up getting this Alliance Paradigm 33-foot fifth wheel, which is relatively short compared to the fifth wheels that are 10 to 12 feet longer. But with our MORryde independent suspension, it does have a gross vehicle weight rating of 16,800 pounds. That's pretty heavy. You throw on a 100-gallon freshwater tank and 150 gallons of wastewater, and those LBs add up really quickly. We have some new news pertaining to this, but before we share that, we thought today would be a fun opportunity to compare some of the pros and cons, similarities and differences between our 26-foot travel trailer and our 33-foot fifth wheel. Now, the RV lifestyle is super unique to each individual and the family's needs, so there is no one right rig for everyone. But sometimes hearing why people make the choices they did or the differences between the rigs that they had can help others make decisions for themselves.
Yeah, and we've actually gotten this question a lot from our viewers, like how we like this compared to the travel trailer, and we're gonna go over a lot of those specific questions here.
Okay, to keep this video kind of concise, we're gonna cover these categories today: length, height, width in regards to driving and parking, inside living space and outside storage, boondocking, and RV parks and campgrounds. Okay, I'm gonna rattle off some numbers to start this out just so we can kind of understand what we're talking about. So as far as length goes, you have a 21-foot truck. Our travel trailer was 26 feet. So we had about 47 feet of overall length on that setup. Now on the fifth wheel, it's 33 feet. And you take that with the 21-foot truck and you're up to 54 feet. But the uniqueness of a fifth wheel is that about 4 feet of that cab overhangs on the truck bed. So really our overall length on the fifth wheel and truck is about 50 feet. So you got 47 feet on the travel trailer and about 50 feet on the fifth wheel. And we did have a bike rack on the travel trailer quite a bit. So the length of these two setups was very, very similar.
Very comparable. And that was one of the perks in going to the fifth wheel, was that you get to minus that overhang from your overall, which really made it feel easy to get into that.
Yes, but that's kind of where the similarities stop on these two, because the height was a really big one. When you go to a full profile fifth wheel like this, ours is 13.5 feet tall. Our travel trailer was 11.5 feet tall. So you're talking about a 2-foot difference, which you can definitely feel in the campgrounds and while out driving around.
Yeah, and I would even say that the height is like the biggest difference in towing and driving. Of course, you have to look out for the obvious things like bridges, but those are pretty few and far between where you actually get those low clearance bridges. It's more an everyday issue with just trees, power lines, and just unruly shrubs. And those things are everywhere across the entire country, whether you're out boondocking or in RV parks.
At our very first campground, when we brought our fifth wheel home, there was multiple trees that we had no way to get around that were just gonna scrape right along the side of the RV. And luckily they were just soft leaves and things like that, but you never know when there can be a very sharp branch.
So aside from the trees and having that height limitation there, you know, you also have the width limitation. So where I'm coming from with this is when we had our travel trailer, we used to be fairly confident going into parking lots, things like a Publix grocery store or a Sam's Club or a Costco. And when we got the new fifth wheel, we're not as confident pulling into tight parking lots where we don't know what our maneuverability might be in there. So gone are the days where we try to combine running errands with travel days. We always do that on separate days that we're not towing now. And even on days that we are towing, we find we limit ourselves strictly to truck stops for fueling up on diesel. Versus in the travel trailer, we used to do more just regular gas stations.
The fifth wheel definitely opened our eyes into we better start being a little bit more careful, and it's just a lot less
Stressful.
to just do the truck stops, the Walmarts, anywhere a big semi is going to be going, we'll follow that path too. Even though I don't feel like a big semi.
No, but I am part of the Truckers Club.
That's true. Chris is part of the Truckers Club. The last dimension we're going to talk about is the weight. Now, our travel trailer was a heavier travel trailer for how small it was. It was around 10,000 pounds. Mm-hmm. And we grew about 60% to 16,000 pounds in the fifth wheel. So
that is such a big difference.
It didn't feel like it at first. When we picked up our fifth wheel when it was completely empty, I remember this pretty specifically. It was, I want to say, just over 12,000 pounds. So it was only a couple more thousand pounds. And when Chris was driving that back to the campground for the first time, she kind of mentioned that there wasn't really that specific, like, ooh, this feels, that much different. It really wasn't that big of a change.
The feel of towing was not significant to notice it.
But when we then moved all of our junk from our travel trailer,
all of our precious belongings,
that too, into the fifth wheel, I want to say it was probably around 2,000 pounds maybe. We also picked up our batteries and part of our electrical system at that time, even though it wasn't installed. So maybe we put in, 2,500 pounds. But when we left the campground the second time, after selling our travel trailer and having everything in the fifth wheel, that first right turn and acceleration, Chris goes, oh, I feel the trailer now.
I did. It just felt like you could just feel that it was being towed behind you. And that was something that we never felt before, just because having the 1-ton diesel truck with that travel trailer, we never felt that, oh, we're towing. Like, it was just such a powerful truck for, what did you say, 10,000 pounds?
10,000 pounds.
Travel trailer. You didn't even know what was there.
So collectively, all of these numbers kind of add up into the fifth wheel, and together they kind of make more difference than individually. Okay, the last thing to just touch briefly on as far as driving, I think all of those extra dimensions did up the feeling when we were in smaller areas. Let's just say going through small downtown towns and cities and things like that.
Yeah.
Construction zones where you have the cones and the girder railing right there.
Those are always stressful because it never fails that there's always at least one cone that's off the line it should be and it's too narrow. And you almost hold your breath going through it.
Winding mountain roads. We did a lot of those in California this summer.
Yeah.
That extra width and height kind of just really sticks out.
And that weight pulling up a mountain.
Yes, going up that steep grade on the backside of Big Bear.
That was the first time where we felt that weight really pulling us back.
Yeah, and that's a unique mountain road because it's one where the hairpin is so sharp that you need to basically slow down to, 5
miles an hour.
Yeah, and then try to speed back up. You might have even almost stopped at one point because it was such a hairpin turn. You got to make sure you made it correctly.
Yeah.
And then you have to try to accelerate again, and you're already on this really steep 10%, 15% grade. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was very steep. So that's definitely something you're going to feel with all of that in combination.
Yep.
So as far as parking, to me, the travel trailer was kind of hard to get in those 90 degree, because it just didn't turn that quickly. It was great for out boondocking, but while in some of these tight campsites, the fifth wheel generally has a better ability to get into those tight 90-degree parking spaces. Yeah,
I would definitely agree with that. I think that maneuverability, the fifth wheel does turn better. But I think also, since it is heavier, I've had a couple of sites, only a couple of sites where the road, in an RV park, is so narrow to get in. When it's really wet and muddy, then you can feel that weight more where the tires don't want to move in that mud.
Okay, Chris is talking about specifically a recent campsite we were at here in Florida, and it was in an old mobile home park, you know, where they're mostly mobile homes, permanent structures, and then there's a few RV sites in certain areas, and sometimes they'll tuck those RV sites in between homes, and the road that people drive on is not much wider than a golf cart. They're really, really narrow, and so when you're trying to maneuver your trailer and your truck on that road, you don't have any room to swing your front end out.
Yeah.
And there was so much rain here in Florida.
Yeah.
It was so muddy. It looked like a war zone. There was just, it was so muddy and dirty. We've just never ran into that before. That was, what a difficult
That
spot.
was almost traumatizing. It was the first site that I ever said, I don't want to park here. Let's try to get a new site. And we couldn't because it was the only site. But luckily, the neighbors in that situation were all super helpful. They understood that in order for us to park, we had to drive on their driveway. We had to get really close to their rigs, and they were nothing but supportive.
They were great. Okay, let's talk about inside living space and outside storage next. Now, one of the great things about a fifth wheel, and one of the unique things, is that the whole 33 feet of our fifth wheel length is basically all living space. Mm-hmm. Now, our 26-foot travel trailer was a 22-foot box that we lived in, and about 4 feet of front tongue and hitch area. So you really do lose a lot of that space. So although the two RVs are not that different in length, the inside and outside spaces are way bigger in a fifth wheel. So there's a lot more pros to a fifth wheel, obviously, in the inside living and storage areas.
Yeah, and plus you have the opposing slide on this fifth wheel that we didn't have on the travel trailer. When you have that extra baseline width, plus the extra slide outs, plus the extra height, it is way more comfortable on the inside.
So for the most part, in a fifth wheel, you're going to get a lot more of those homey, housey, residential style feelings that we've talked about in the past. You know, and that has a lot to do with the washer and dryer.
Yes.
You know, a separate upstairs bedroom with a door, a bathroom with a giant shower, you know, with glass doors. It feels very homey in that sense. And then the kitchen space. It's very hard to get an island kitchen in a travel trailer. There are some big travel trailers that have them.
Yeah.
But you're talking big 33-foot plus travel trailers with dual opposing slides. So there's not a lot of those out there. But this kitchen space is something, and living space together, that we really love.
Yeah, in fact, I didn't even realize how much the small kitchens in our previous RVs was smothering my passion for cooking. And I love food, I love cooking. I had a larger kitchen in the travel trailer, like in comparison to other travel trailers, it was a really good sized kitchen. But man, when I got inside of this kitchen, I cried tears of joy because I could feel my soul coming alive on something that I loved so much, and that it was suppressed with a small kitchen. And now it's back and I love it. And I have this huge fridge, huge freezer. I no longer have to obsess about how am I gonna store this or store that. And it's just comfortable.
Yeah, it's hard to compare these two spaces because they're really like night and day difference. Although on the travel trailer, we felt we did pick out a very unique and good space for what we were looking for. So it was a single open room, which helped that smaller space feel bigger, and it had, you know, an 8-foot L-shaped kitchen, which is very large for a travel trailer. Even, you know, a Class A's sometimes don't have big kitchens like that. You know, we had a large dinette. We had a very good amount of windows for a travel trailer, and then the bed was in the same room. So it kind of felt like a
studio
style apartment, which was really great at first. But then, you know, you start to kind of feel the differences of not having a living room, not having a couch, always having your bed in view.
Yep.
So really our only space to sit was at the table, which worked out very, very well for us for a long time.
Yeah.
But as we've mentioned before, moving on to year 5, year 6 of full-time living, we wanted a little bit more space and that more house type feel. Mm-hmm. We got so excited about the inside, we forgot to talk about the outside storage. With our travel trailer being pretty small, we had to utilize our truck bed for a lot of the storage, and it was pretty crammed full most of the time. So whenever we got something new, we had to pretty much rearrange it all. We did have a small pass-through cubby on the front of our travel trailer, but it wasn't very tall or wide. Now with the fifth wheel, we obviously gained quite a bit of pass-through storage with the height and the width, allowing us to store our entire electrical system as well as 2 foldable e-bikes, amongst other stuff in there. But with the sliding fifth wheel hitch, we did lose most of our truck bed storage, although there is enough for a few items like the grill, water hoses, leveling blocks, and things like that. Okay, we wanted to cover boondocking a little bit because we love to do that and the differences between a fifth wheel and the travel trailer. We obviously had a good amount of boondocking spots in the travel trailer. You guys have probably seen dozens and dozens of videos of us taking that travel trailer in a lot of different spaces. And it worked out very well because of the size differences that we were talking about earlier. It was a lot easier to take that rig out into some of these boondocking spots. Although you still had to be somewhat careful because of that overall length. You're still 47 feet long. You can't get into an area that's too tight and you could have trouble getting out of.
The overall length still was a major consideration, especially as the grounds, when you're boondocking, you know, the levelness of the grounds is so inconsistent.
Unhitching and hitching in those areas because, you know, you got 47 feet of truck and trailer, and when you're out in these boondocking spots, they're mostly not that flat. So you're going to have these uneven areas, and that tongue and ball would stick quite a bit, and we did have some difficulties.
It's true. I actually blocked that out of my memory. It must have been kind of rough because now when you're saying that, it's all coming back, especially when you were like, when you're nose down and that ball is putting upward pressure into the...
Yes, it was hard to get them to disconnect, which is why, let's just say, the van that we lived in at first was so much easier, because that you could pretty much get anywhere. It was 22 feet total, and you just, you know, could find a good spot to park and set up. Now the downside was the van had horrible tank spaces.
And horrible ground clearance.
It did. But our travel trailer actually had pretty good tank spaces. It was around 70 gallons fresh and 40 gray, 40 black. So moving to the fifth wheel, and we've done a few boondocking spots you guys have seen. Now that we're out on the East Coast, it's a lot more difficult, and we don't know how much boondocking we're going to see out here. We're excited to get back out west eventually. Part of the fifth wheel advantages are going to be those larger tanks and the larger roof space for a bigger solar system.
Yeah.
So this one has pretty good tanks. It's like 100 gallons of fresh water, and we have 100 gallons of gray roughly and 50 gallons of black. So,
yes. And it's really nice because if you watched our old stuff, you know that we're not shy to talk about black tank talk. It's like you have to talk about it as an RVer. With the van and with the travel trailer, I had to do a lot of peeing outside. Aaron did a lot of peeing outside. It's just something we had to do in order to maximize our stay. And it's something I don't enjoy to do it. Like, I don't seek to do it. So I'm really happy in this new fifth wheel. My Red Solo Cup days are over.
Yeah, 40 gallons sounds like a big black tank, but really that black tank would only last us just over a week in the travel trailer.
If you're drinking a lot of water like you should be, and you're winky, and if you're like staying properly hydrated, it is not hard to fill up a black tank just by peeing a lot.
But I think a full 2 weeks we can do. I know 10 days we can do super comfortably in this fifth wheel and not, you know, even worry about having to resort to anything crazy.
Yeah.
You know, once you actually get the fifth wheel to a spot, then it's a lot more comfortable to sit and stay, if that's your style. You know, some people only want to go for a night or two, a couple nights, maybe 4 or 5, and then it makes more sense to have a smaller rig. So
yeah,
again, as everybody talks about, you know, the pros and cons of RVs are so drastic compared to, you know, what you're actually looking to do.
Yeah.
So I think the evolution of our boondocking style is going to move us more towards big rig boondocking, you know, and there's still lots of that out west, lots of open flat lands, lots of sunshine for your solar panels, and you can really, you know, get these big rigs in a lot of areas that are still really, really close to a lot of national parks and a lot of fun places to visit. And you have that home base that you can kind of just park and sit out there, and then you just take your tow vehicle and you go and sightsee.
Yeah.
So while we're looking forward to getting back to that boondocking, right now we're in a big stint of RV parks, and that is the next thing we're going to talk about. RV parks, campgrounds, and for us, I think it makes most sense, you know, the bigger your RV is, perhaps the more comfortable it's going to be while you're in an RV park. You know, everybody camps a little different. Some people like to be outside more. We're working quite a bit inside. We like to enjoy the outside space with the big windows on our campsite, while our neighboring side usually doesn't have as many windows. So that way, what we've been doing lately is getting these end sites, and we're able to kind of block off our neighbors on this side, and we have our open end site. And we've been able to do this at campgrounds, you know, all across the country. It's, if you request the end site, a lot of times they'll just put you in it, you know, no upcharge or anything.
Yeah.
So that's great. Now on our travel trailer, our big windows was on the driver's side. So when we were in RV parks, sitting at our table, our giant window was directly looking at our neighbor's sewer line, or their patio. So that was definitely not as comfortable to be, and I think that's why we really, really preferred to be out boondocking at that point.
Yeah, I mean, boondocking is always more beautiful. You know, we're pretty 50-50 with our time boondocking versus RV parks, and the point is, being inside of an RV that you're super comfortable in makes those RV park stays much more comfortable.
A lot of these parks are smaller, older, tighter turns, and so the larger your setup is, the harder it is to get in these RV parks and actually maneuver around or even park at times.
Yeah.
So that can be really difficult. And again, that's kind of why we wanted this smaller 33-foot fifth wheel, to kind of still be a large fifth wheel, but be relatively short, much easier to park than a 46-foot rig.
Yeah, and there's been several spots where we've been able to park with this, and we've looked at each other and said, oh man, if we were 2 feet larger, we wouldn't fit here.
Yes, and a lot of campgrounds actually have a limited number of larger spots, so the smaller you are, the more options you have. And sometimes, as a little rig, even when we were in our van, you get put on this giant spot and you get all that extra space.
Yeah, that was really nice.
Now that we're on the East Coast, we mentioned we're going to be doing the Keys to Canada trip, and we're probably going to be staying in some more state parks along this trip. And a lot of those are dry camping, so they have no electrical, sometimes they'll have no water, and really it's just like boondocking, but in a...
with a reservation.
Yeah, with a reservation, and you got to pay for it.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're thankful again to be on the smaller side, because a lot of those state parks, you can't get the really, really, really big rigs. What were some of the limitations? I think we saw it was either less than 35 feet or less than 40 feet.
Yeah, there is a lot of 35 feet. I recall a lot of 37 feet. And when you're parking like your RV with a big truck, that space just goes so quickly.
Yes, so we're looking forward to still staying big yet small enough to kind of skirt the lines on a lot of this. That's definitely the goal. So we have some news to share over the next coming weeks, but I just want to present it in the proper way. So the next few videos, in amongst our travel videos, we're going to be talking more kind of about this subject. So stay tuned for that.
And no, I'm not pregnant. If you're wondering if we're building our family, that's not it. I know what you're all thinking right now.
We appreciate everybody watching. We appreciate this small little chat that we had today, and we'll see you on the next video.
Bye.